ghost town. From the moment Jason first heard about the hidden ghost town deep in Black Hollow Forest, he knew he had to see it for himself. Urban exploration had always been his passion, a thrill that got his blood pumping. The idea of finding a forgotten place where time had stood still was like striking gold. With a camera in hand and a map that few had seen, he ventured into the forest one crisp autumn morning, eager to document the decaying remnants of history. Little did he know this wasn't just another exploration, this was a trap, carefully laid for anyone curious enough to wander too far. Jason had heard whispers of Abigail, a once prosperous mining town that vanished from maps in the late 1800s. Theories about its fate were endless. Disease, a mining disaster, even tales of a curse placed on the town by an old witch who had been wronged. But the truth was murkier. People claimed that no one who ventured into the heart of Black Hollow came back. Others said that those who did return were never the same. Jason didn't believe in such nonsense. After all, every abandoned place has its own ghost stories. This was no different, or so he thought. The descent into silence the forest felt endless as Jason hiked deeper into it, the canopy above swallowing the sunlight and replacing it with shadows. Every step he took felt heavier, the air thick with the scent of damp leaves and something older. He checked his map, the red X marking the spot where Abigail once stood. His pulse quickened as the trees started to thin, revealing broken paths and what looked like old wagon tracks overgrown with vines. Then the first building came into view, a crumbling structure that must have once been a general store. Jason's breath caught. The windows were still intact, though clouded with dust, and through the grime, he could make out shelves lined with items long forgotten, rusted cans, empty bottles, and what appeared to be a ledger lying open on the counter. The town stretched out ahead, half hidden by fog, with narrow streets flanked by more dilapidated buildings. Unbelievable, Jason whispered to himself. He clicked his camera on and started documenting. Each photo he snapped was a glimpse into the past, faded signs advertising long-gone businesses, cars rusting in place like metal skeletons, and houses with front doors left ajar as if the inhabitants had left in a hurry. But something felt wrong. The silence of the town wasn't peaceful. It was oppressive. There were no birds, no wind rustling the trees, just nothing. Jason shrugged it off as nerves. It was just his mind playing tricks. He continued through the town, more excited than afraid, until he found what appeared to be the town square. An old fountain, now dry and covered in moss, stood in the center. Around it were various shops and the old town hall. Jason made his way inside. The moment he stepped through the threshold, he was hit with a wave of cold, as though the very air had been drained of life. The interior was dark, and the musty smell was overpowering. His flashlight flickered for a moment, casting brief shadows against the walls before steadying. The room felt lived in, not like an abandoned relic, but as though someone or something had just stepped out. Faint whispers brushed past his ears. Jason froze, every hair on his body standing on end. He strained to listen, but there was nothing. Just his imagination, he told himself. He had to keep moving. He went upstairs, the floorboards creaking under his weight. On the second floor, he found a row of old rooms, their doors slightly ajar. He peeked inside one and saw a desk with papers scattered across it. As he approached, his camera caught something that made his heart skip a beat. On the corner of the desk was an old photograph, black and white, of a family standing in front of what looked like this very building. But it wasn't the photograph that disturbed him. It was the fact that the faces in the photograph were blurred, twisted into unnatural shapes as though caught mid-scream. Suddenly, he heard a noise downstairs. A soft, melancholic melody drifted through the air, an old-timey tune like something from a gramophone. Jason's blood ran cold. He hadn't seen any record players, any radios, any way for music to be playing. He bolted back downstairs, his heart pounding in his chest. The melody of madness, the music led him to the square where it echoed eerily in the empty streets. Jason spun around, trying to locate the source, but all he could see were dark windows staring back at him. Then, in the corner of his vision, something moved, a shadow. It darted from one building to another, too fast for him to make out. His heart raced as he raised his camera and snapped a photo, the flash illuminating the square for a brief brief second, but what the flash revealed made him wish he had kept the lens cap on. There, standing just at the edge of the light, were figures, pale, ghostly figures dressed in old-fashioned clothing, their eyes hollow, their mouths frozen in eerie smiles. They stood still, watching him, as if waiting for something. Then the music stopped. Suddenly the temperature dropped even further, and Jason felt an overwhelming urge to run. He backed away slowly, his breath coming in short gasps. But as he turned to flee, he felt a cold hand brush against his arm. He spun around, but there was no one there. The shadows began to move again, flickering between buildings, growing bolder. Jason ran for the forest, but the path that had been so clear earlier was now swallowed by mist. Panic set in as he realized that he was trapped. Every direction he turned, the town stretched out before him, the shadows closing in. The figures were no longer just watching. They were following him now, slowly at first, but with purpose. He could hear their whispers, feel their cold presence creeping closer with every passing second. Jason stumbled into one of the houses, slamming the door behind him. The house was dark, but his flashlight barely penetrated the thick gloom. As he turned to find another exit, he caught sight of a mirror on the wall. Reflected in the glass was a dark figure standing directly behind him. Jason's heart stopped. He whipped around, but there was nothing there, just empty air. But in the mirror, the figure remained, closer now, its face shrouded in darkness. It raised a hand, reaching out toward him. He screamed, throwing his camera at the mirror, shattering the glass. As the shards hit the floor, the whispering voices surged louder, filling his ears, driving him to the brink of madness. Uncovering the town's sinister secret, Jason had no choice but to flee deeper into the house. Hoping for an escape, he found himself in a basement where old trunks and furniture were piled haphazardly. He fumbled through them, desperate for something, anything to help him. Then he found an old journal, yellowed with age, filled with frantic handwriting. The journal told the story of Abigail, a town cursed by its own greed. The miners had uncovered something deep underground, something that was never meant to be disturbed. The town's leaders, consumed by their hunger for wealth, ignored the warnings, and the town was consumed by darkness. The spirits of those who had perished in the mines, cursed to wander forever, could only be freed by someone who uncovered the truth. Jason felt the weight of the journal in his hands and realized that he was the town's next victim, unless he could find a way to end the curse. But before he could think of a plan, the basement door creaked open and cold air rushed in. The figures were back, their hollow eyes glowing faintly in the dark. The final chase, Jason bolted from the basement, his only thought now to escape the town. He raced through the streets, but every path seemed to lead him in circles. The ghostly figures were everywhere, their whispers now a cacophony drowning out his thoughts. Then he saw a flash of light in the distance like headlights. Salvation, with every ounce of strength, he sprinted toward the light. The figures closed in, their hands reaching for him. He could feel their icy grip pulling him back, but he pushed forward. As he reached the edge of the town, everything went silent. The figures stopped. He stumbled out of the fog and collapsed on the forest floor, gasping for breath. Behind him, the ghost town was swallowed by the mist once more, fading from view. But as Jason looked down at his hands, he saw something that made his blood run cold. His fingers were fading, becoming transparent. The curse hadn't been broken. He was becoming part of the town. Jason's scream echoed through the forest, but there was no one to hear it. If you want to hear more terrifying tales like this one, check out my video on the Shadow Follower, another spine-chilling story about an explorer who stumbles upon something far worse than they could ever imagine. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications because you never know what dark stories we'll uncover next. For a